What's going on, everyone? This is Sound Mix, and today, as I promised earlier in the video, if you've seen my new video that I posted, which it was about like 8:30 in the morning, you can go ahead and click the video, which I'll leave a link right there. So if you want to check out that video that I left before this video that I'm going to do, go ahead and check that out. I do have a huge announcement regarding the video game walkthrough if you have not seen it yet. But for this video, as I've promised before, it is story time with Sonic Mix. So this is what the concept with Sonic, story time will be. Story time is basically going to be, I'm going to talk about a subject, one subject if it's a big subject, and I'm just going to talk about it, talk about where was I when this happened, or what do I think of it personally, just any subject. But for the very first episode, this is the first episode of Storytime, I'm going to do 2 stories today, just for the first episode. So the 2 stories that I like to talk about is how do I feel about the video game industry, and 2, which is relating to video games, what do I feel about the Resident Evil video game series? So let's kick things off with story time. How do I feel about the video game industry? Well, how I feel is it's not doing quite too good. I think it's getting more harder to get video games, and I have a feeling that eventually people won't be buying as many video games as time goes on. And with the systems that come out and the companies that make these systems are not doing too great. So let's talk about video games. Back in the 80s, when you had the Atari, which was the grand fiesta of video games. It was the born era of video games. You had Pong, where all you had was boop, 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 and then Pong turned into Pac-Man, where you had a little Pac-Man eating up all those pebblets and chasing the ghosts, or getting away from the ghosts. Then the Atari evolved into the 2600, then the 7200. I forgot what the Atari era name was. And then somewhere around 86, 87-ish, you had the release of the Nintendo and the release of Mario, which we're talking about the awesome classic Mario, the 2D side-scroller, jumping on the Goombas, getting the mushrooms when you hit the question box, and going through the tunnels, swimming around. And then Sega tried to get some competition, and they designed Sonic the Hedgehog in a battle between the plumber Super Mario and the world's fastest hedgehog, Sonic, going at it, colliding against each other. And in the early 90s, it was about Nintendo versus Sega. At this time, Atari was out of the picture, and the 2 dominant kings were Nintendo and Sega, the 2 dominant kings in their generation eras. And then around 96, I think it was 96, 97, then Sony came in. And with Sony was the PlayStation. And on the PlayStation, you had amazing games on there. Like, you had the Siphon Filter series, which unfortunately that series is dead now, but that was an amazing series when that game first debuted. You had, of course, the Madden games on PlayStation, which those games were awesome. You had Spyro, which was basically the mascot. If Spyro wasn't the mascot, it was Crash Bandicoot. Crash, another great game that came out during that era. Then you had the N64 trying to compete against the PlayStation. The Sega Saturn, unfortunately, it might have had some good games, but the price of the Sega Saturn was ridiculous. Thus, Sega Saturn lost big time during the battle between the PlayStation and the N64. With the N64, you had Super Mario 64, you had The Legend of Zelda, Ocarina of Time, you had 007 GoldenEye. Just amazing A+ games that you could sit down and enjoy every single moment of it. And I remember these games, and believe me, these games were definitely what made the 90s such a phenomenal era during the whole 90s. And then, as time goes on, Sega tries to make one final big move, and that's the Dreamcast. The Dreamcast was supposed to be better than the N64. And I'll be honest with you, it was better than the N64. Because if I'm not mistaken, the GameCube didn't come out till 2001. If I'm not mistaken. And then the PS2 came out roughly around the same time as the Dreamcast did. But because the PS2 was so big, because of the PlayStation, everybody got the PS2, and the Sega Dreamcast was left in the corner and was never picked. So Sega died, and Sega decided to join Nintendo. And then Nintendo made the GameCube, and then out of nowhere, Microsoft decides to make Xbox. Xbox, the dominant king of graphics, with amazing games. You had the Splinter Cells, you had the Dead or Alive, you had the Blood Rave, which Blood Rave was pretty cool. Fighting on the ships, all these ships that they made. It's like they don't make those games no more. I find it to be those games. I found those games were fun. Then of course, the Microsoft, the fanboy Halo games came out. So the battle was Nintendo, Sega, Sony, and Xbox, Microsoft. And then we had an evolution, another evolution. It was the Xbox evolving into the 360, the PS2 evolving into the PS3, and the GameCube evolving into the Nintendo Wii. 3 midnight launches. The Xbox 360 midnight launch did pretty good for what it was worth, but within 2 weeks, for the people that bought it, got the red light of death within 2 weeks. Sony PS3, there was riots. There was even a gun shoot. And I think actually someone did die during one of the riots. And when somebody dropped the gun and started firing. And then somebody robbed a GameStop, stole about, 200 copies of the PS3, and nobody didn't found them until like 2 months later when they sold them on eBay. Smart move, guys. Oh, you gotta love stupid people these days. Hey, let's sell it on eBay. Oh, we get busted. We'll go to jail. Duh. The Nintendo Wii was the only console that was quiet, had no riots, and I will go as far as to say, between the console wars of budgets, the Nintendo Wii beat it, Xbox 360 and the PS3, when it came to money, budget, which is relating to the same thing, and the line of the people. There was a positive line, it was quiet, and you could not find a Wii until about 8 months later. It was that ridiculous. They were selling the system like hotcakes. It was that crazy. 360, they still had something on the shelves, and PS3 owners, they brought the system back because they had problems within the first 2 days. And now you have the Nintendo Wii U, which came out in November of 2012. And then you have the PS4 coming out sometime this year. And then you have the new Xbox, which is still undecided of what the name is called. I know a lot of people are saying 720, but I highly guarantee it will not be called the 720. If it is called the 720, I would be utterly surprised. And now we're heading into this new generation now with the rumor going about that Xbox might only do, in order to play the games, you have to be an online member, which I think is completely stupid. And I think actually whoever came up with that idea actually got fired, which is good actually, because we don't need that. And there's people still out there who don't have computers. As much as that sounds and as much as that's hard to believe, yes, there are still people who are going around this world don't have a computer. But the problem with games is the fact that $60 for a game should not be worth it. In all honesty, a game should be 40 bucks. Now that's just me, but 60 bucks, it's a money thing. I mean, when there's green, there's money. But, I mean, look at games like Resident Evil, the Raccoon City Chronicles, or Operation Raccoon City. That game was worth 60 bucks, and that game was nowhere near 60 bucks. In all honesty, the game should have been 30. But, of course, it ain't gonna be 30. And the other problem is that there's too many first-person shooters. Like, you have Call of Duty, you have that Bulletstorm game, you had the Serious Sam, you had Halo, you have the BioShock series. I mean, there's too many first-person shooter games, and people are getting sick and tired of it. They're not creative. You don't have games that are like Zelda no more. You don't have games that are like a Super Mario no more. You don't have games that are like Final Fantasy. I mean, people have been so obsessed with first-person shooters that game companies feel that, oh, hey, let's just do more first-person shooter games. And that's not true. And if games were to be irrelevant and have creative ideas and be original, maybe we could have that fun gameplay. Maybe we could get more third-person shooters. Maybe we can get more... Hell, maybe we can do a flip around where you could play where you can be in a first-person view, and then you flip-flop to a third-person view. Maybe we can get more of those games. But first-person shooter games have been the genre of games, and they've been the big thing for like the past 5 years now, and people are sick and tired of it. And you know what? I really can't blame them. And as a matter of fact, when it comes to video games, the series are dying. Or there's nothing good out there no more. Or there's a new series that looks really good and you want to try it. But the thing is that you don't want to try it because A, you don't know how the game is going to be. 2, it's 60 bucks and you don't want to waste the 60 bucks. And 3, you don't want to take the chance. Thus, you go on YouTube, see if somebody posted a video, and then you basically watch it there and you say to yourself, wow, I should have bought this game. But then, of course, by the time you buy the game will probably be 50 bucks. And it probably won't be at the price that you want it to be at. And you might have to wait an extra year or two, depending. But, and actually, from what I understand, when Skyward Sword came out, it actually killed, I guess you could say, the first-person shooter games. And it actually made people play more games like Zelda than first-person shooter games. And I think that's why people don't want to play first-person shooter games, is because of it gets repetitive and it gets boring. They want to play games like Zelda, where you can embark on a huge adventure and go through dungeons and beat these bosses and get these crystals or whatever they throw into the game, and have a tremendous storyline with awesome gameplay from beginning to end. And even I myself have not been interested in the modern day video games. I mean, yes, I have been interested in Tomb Raider, and I was tempted to get Tomb Raider, but I skipped on it. And now I only get the series that I'm pretty much comfortable in, like Super Mario, like Sonic the Hedgehog, like the Pokemon games, only the handheld ones, the Resident Evil series. I mean, there are very few series that I rarely play now. And I have a feeling by a couple years, maybe 3 years from now, I'm only going to be getting about 2 games a year, maybe 3 for that matter. So if you're in my shoe where the series are dying and you don't want to try something new because you don't want to waste the money, you're in my shoe. And you know what? I really can't blame you for it. So that's how I feel about the video game industry. What was once a great era of the 90s, now it's all about the first-person shooters. And you know what's sad? You have games that are supposed to be scary, but yet they're not scary. Which I'll mention that in the Resident Evil topic. But yeah, actually, you know, I want to quickly get this out of the way. You have these horror games that are supposed to be scary, but yet you have indie games on Xbox, indie games on PC, and games that I'll mention, for instance, like Amnesia, The Dark Descent, Scratches. I find those games to be much scarier than Resident Evil or any other scary game. And yet, those 2 games that I mentioned, Amnesia and Scratches, they're not well known. They're not blockbuster games, but I guarantee you if they were, they would overshadow Resident Evil and any other scary game in a heartbeat. I guarantee that. So in all honesty, my theory with video games is that it had its run, and you know what? It better get its run back up. And you know what? Scary games should be scary once again. Stop, like, having too many first-person shooters because it's getting repetitive. And finally, make it all about the story and gameplay, and don't make it about the graphics. Because it's not the graphics that makes an excellent game. It's the story and gameplay that makes an excellent game. So this is my theory on how I feel the video game industry is. Please do leave me your comment on how you think it is. I know you probably would have to leave more than one comment, but please do so. I do want to hear what you have to say, or even make a video response to this. I'll be more than happy to watch a video and let me hear what you guys have to say. So please do leave a comment, give me a rate, or not a rate, a like. You can't give me the 5-star rating like it was 5 years ago, like how it was with YouTube. But please do check out my channel, which I'll leave a link right now in that. Right there. Please do check out my channel and do subscribe. But we're not done yet, ladies and gentlemen. I said I was going to do 2 in 1 video for the first episode. So let's jump into the second topic. Now, this may not be long, but let's get right in under the way. So, how do I feel about Resident Evil, the video game series? The once main event video game now becoming a low-card, careless video game. Resident Evil, during the PlayStation era, was one of the most scariest games ever made. As a matter of fact, it was so scary when one of the video games tester tested the game, he got so scared that he could not continue the game. Thus, somebody had the mind to say, well then, you know what? If you feel it's scary, let's make it public. Thus, Resident Evil was born, and it was a groundbreaking game. And people got scared so bad that they started crapping their pants or peeing their pants or running out of the room scared. Resident Evil had that tremendous atmosphere. Sure, yes, the cutscene live action was kind of corny, but The atmosphere, the horror aspect, and just every turn you made, you didn't know what to expect out of that turn. It was that turn where it was like, what is going to jump at me? What is going to jump at me? What is going to happen? Is something going to break through the wall? Is something going to break through the glass? What is going to happen? And believe me, when I used to play it, I was so terrified of Resident Evil. And then you had Resident Evil 2, which in my honest opinion, it is, the best game ever made. With Leon and Claire, you go through a city and then into a police station, and with some new encounters like the Licker and some other bosses in the game, Resident Evil 2, in my eyes, was much better than the first one. It had a much creepy atmosphere, and the fact that you didn't know what was going to pop out. And especially when you played the Scenario B with Mr. X, you had Mr. X stalking you, and you never knew when he was going to pop out. I mean, he could pop out at any moment, and it had that scare factor, and it made you so scared that you didn't know if he was going to pop out at that moment. You didn't. And that is what made the game so great and so phenomenal. And then in Resident Evil 3, you had that same scenario, but this time was with the Nemesis. Same scenario. You had that atmosphere. When is he going to come out? How is he going to come out? Is he going to come out through the window? Is he going to bust through the wall? How is he going to come out? You play the main character as Jill Valentine. And just going through the city, collecting items, figuring out puzzles. Just an amazing atmosphere. And when many people thought Resident Evil 3 was the end because the whole town blew up and you killed the Nemesis at the end, then came Code Veronica. Now, amazingly enough, I never saw Code Veronica, but I did see the walkthrough. And I loved it. I loved Code Veronica. I loved how you went from Claire to Chris, playing as the brother, playing as the sister. And it was a great game. I enjoyed watching it, and you know what? Maybe one day, and hopefully maybe I can play the game myself one day, whenever I can get the chance to. And then we hit a whole new evolution. The evolution of the behind the shoulder. Resident Evil 4. And with Resident Evil 4, you had Leon S. Kennedy behind the shoulder, and this game was such a success and got 10 out of 10 rating that this game was like starstruck to the moon. I mean, this game was high above up there. This was the game that everybody talked about, and it did leave a creepy atmosphere. I mean, there were times that I did feel creeped. Now, to some people, maybe they didn't felt creeped out, but I really did. I think when it got to the nighttime, you entered the castle, and there was the sewer part, which was only for a short time, I felt creeped. I really felt like, what is going to come around that corner? And you had the first person behind you, so you didn't have that fixed view, so you really had to be careful around your surrounding because you didn't know what was going to be behind you, so you could be running, and somebody just comes out of nowhere and hits you. And of course, with the whole Gatling gun, or that, I forgot what was his name in the game, but the guy with the big minigun, that was actually awesome. I don't know about you guys, but I found that to be a holy crap moment. But I loved that. I really did. And then, just talking about the side games, like Outbreak. Outbreak was fun, but the game was, got boring after you kept playing the same stages with different characters, but it just got repetitive. And I think the side projects of Resident Evil, they weren't all that great. I mean, at least they tried something new, but I didn't feel like it lived up to the standards. Which, of course, I'm just talking about the main series in general of Resident Evil. But then we get into Resident Evil 5. And this was the start of the two-player campaign. Now, don't get me wrong. I enjoyed the two-player campaign. It was definitely new. It was definitely original. And it was something that you could bring a friend along and play together on a campaign and work out a plan with each other. And same thing with online. But the one problem with the game, and especially what I had, was the fact that there was no scared. I did not feel scared at all in Resident Evil 5. There was not one moment I could think that I felt scared. And then you had that one scene where it showed the blonde girl, where a lot of people thought it was Sherry, but it just turned out to be just some random chick. Just out of nowhere. The bosses were cool. I found the bosses to be pretty unique in its own matter. The character Sheva, I didn't get into Sheva. And you know what's funny, actually? The beta version of Resident Evil 5, I personally believe that would have been better than this game. Don't get me wrong, I enjoyed the game. I enjoyed it for what it was worth. But I do believe that Resident Evil 5 was the start of the downfall. Because what was once this main event game got dropped down. And I think a lot of people, maybe not a lot, but a lot of people started to maybe say, you know what, this game is not Resident Evil. And it did not feel like a Resident Evil. As a matter of fact, I kind of felt like I was playing a SOCOM US Navy SEAL game. Because it was fast-paced action, there was no scare to it, and you had people using crossbows. Then they brought back the minigun guy, which was already done in Resident Evil 4. Which I think his name was the Big Daddy, if I'm not mistaken. And then, you know, it was the same thing over again. And then we get to Resident Evil 6. Probably the most anticipated game ever. Bringing back Leon, bringing back Chris, and introducing a new character, Jake. A game that I feel that a lot of people thought was going to be better, or at least tie with Resident Evil 5. And thus, the game was a letdown. I will give credit. I did enjoy Leon's campaign. I think out of the 4 campaigns that were in it, including Ada's, Leon's campaign I enjoyed. It did brought back the survival horror of Resident Evil. However, there were 2 problems. One, you had a partner. And I don't think they should never ever brought back the 2-player campaign again. And 2, just like Resident Evil 5, I did not get scared once. I did like some of the new elements with that little train element. The monsters were cool. I like some of the monster designs. But at the same time, I didn't feel like I was playing a Resident Evil game. Chris Redfield's was way too much like a Call of Duty / SOCOM. Fast-paced action, in-your-face combat. No. I did not join Chris whatsoever. Jake was interesting. I did like the fact that he was the son of Wesker, and Sherry coming back was outstanding because you didn't hear nothing from Sherry since 2. And Ada's campaign, I will be honest with you, I would put her on the same caliber as Leon's campaign. And the other fact is that you played solely. And I said to myself, why couldn't Resident Evil 6 be like this? If all campaigns were solo, I would think Resident Evil 6 would be better than 5. But where do I put Resident Evil 6 as a standard? Probably tied, if not as good as Resident Evil 5. And I truly feel that with Resident Evil 6, it went from being the main event star to not close to being main event. Now, back down to the ground. And that's sad to say. But I will say this, Leon's campaign saved the game. If it wasn't for Leon, I think this would have been the worst Resident Evil game ever made. But that's just how I feel. So what do I feel about Resident Evil? Well, to the makers of Resident Evil, stop making it a Call of Duty type game or a SOCOM game. And if you do attempt to make Resident Evil 7, bring back the horror. And you know what? Here's an interesting stipulation. Go back to the classic fixed camera and then have it at certain times where you have it behind the shoulder. So mix it up a little bit. Have the old mix in with the new. Kind of like in Sonic Generations. You had the classic Sonic and you had the modern Sonic. Mix them together. And you know what? Sonic, like a game like Sonic Generations, it worked out very good. You can do it with Resident Evil, but they're probably not going to do it. Will they make Resident Evil 7, especially with the scenario with Jake when he eats that apple? I don't think it's a 7. I think that's the Mercenaries because Jake was a mercenary, but it could lead into a 7. Which I think personally, in the Resident Evil world, I truly do believe Jake is a big enough star to have his own game. I know that's saying a lot, but that's how I truly feel. But you know what? If you do put him in its own game, I would love to have it be horror and have the scare factor as high as it can be. And I mean high. Like Resident Evil Remake high. Heck, Resident Evil Remake was better than the original, at least I think, because it was scary from start to finish. Same thing with Resident Evil 0. It was scary from start to finish. If you can have that scare caliber, if not go very high with it, I think you're going to have an outstanding game. But I guarantee you they're probably not going to do that, and that's sad. And my look of Resident Evil overall, you know, it was once a game that was phenomenal. I loved it. But now, I've kind of had a change of heart with it. Will I always be a sucker to get the next Resident Evil game? Probably so. Will I hope it'll be better or be worth the money? Absolutely. And you know what? If they make a 7, I hope it will be worth the $60. Or I hope it will be worth the $100 with the special edition that comes with it. But that's all I gotta say. Thank you guys so much for watching this 30+ minute video of my 2 story times of how I feel about the video game industry and how I feel about the Resident Evil video game series. Please leave me your comments. Let me hear your comments, and I'll be more than happy to read your comments, and heck, leave a video response. And heck, I'll be more than happy to watch your video response. And we went over 30 minutes, so I'm hoping once again I can upload this, which I've seen to be uploading just fine. So I think we're doing good. But until then, this is Sonic. Please check out the channel that's right there. And please do give a subscribe, and I will be doing more of this. But this time, only 1 story time with each episode. Until then, guys, thank you for watching, and I'll talk to you later.